Okay, Amanda, so let's see if I can show you this. So, let's say this is the corner of your quilt. And will you stop barking? She always has to bark when I'm doing stuff. And then you're going to cut your borders. Now, when you cut your borders, remember, your miter's going to go this way, so the borders have to be at least this long. So what I like to do is, this is one border piece, and I make it even longer. And this is another border piece, and I would make that longer too. So, so that's for the cutting. Now, when I do multiple borders, like I'm going to show you on this quilt, I didn't do it here, but you see I did miter this, and I also mitered this. And the reason I mitered this, even though it didn't need to be, is because I joined these two pieces together as one piece. And so I didn't have to do two miters. I did one whole miter at a time. Now, just for general cutting, you see I match this stripe. If you want to match the stripe, you're going to have to make sure your fabric ends at the same, your design ends at the same place at this corner. Now, if you have a square quilt, that's easy. Just make sure that the center of each border is cut on the same stripe, and that way when you bring them down, they will match. So when I go to stitch, then first I'm going to mark. Now, it's very important when you're sewing, you're going to mark your 1/4 inch seam there with an X. And you're going to do that on each piece. So you see I've left a little space here just for us to, so I could show you the cutting, but really your quilt would be up against this. So on each of these pieces, this would be where your stitching would end. So you would take first one side, line it up here, line up your X's, and stitch. And remember, you want to end right on that X. You don't want to stitch down. So then you would take the second side, same thing. Line up your border along your quilt, stitch to the X or from the X, and no further. And then you're going to end up with kind of two floppy pieces hanging off the corner of your quilt. Now, I know most of the quilt books then tell you what you want to do is to determine the seam line of your miter. You're going to cut this, mark this at a 45-degree angle. So let's see if I can do this one-handed. Nope, because I can't even think while I'm doing this. Oh, here we go. So at the bottom of your border, from that X to where your two pieces would cross, from this X to where your two pieces cross, you would draw your 45-degree line. And this is very, I'm sorry, I can't do this with one hand. So this would be your line. And you're going to mark that on each piece of your border. That is your stitching line. Don't cut that. That's your stitching line. Hold on, let me mark it. Okay. So, this side of the border would have this marking. This side of the border would have this marking. And remember, these pieces would still be sticking out here. You haven't cut anything. You just had two long border pieces. You've sewn to this star, so the pieces hanging off are just kind of squares, well, rectangles, depending on what size your border is. On each loose piece, you would make this marking, and it basically goes from where the outer edges would cross to your star. Now, what I was talking about, that I add a line. So when you've sewn these to your quilt, let me see if I could quickly do something rough. Okay, so now I'm going to join these pieces together. So I've got my corner of my quilt. I've got a border piece here. Sorry, I'm eating a cough drop so I don't cough. I've got a border piece, I'm sorry, here. This is not so easy. Let's say it's sticking off the edge. That might make it easier. And on both pieces, I have indicated this stitch line, okay? So let's say now you've sewn these on. You've sewn just to the square. What I do is, this is the right side. I press this seam towards my border, just to the start. I press this seam towards my border, just to the start. And my additional marking then, so let's say the blue piece is on top. You've still got everything loose, nothing stitched here. I take my disappearing ink pen, I use the White Clover. I draw this line, and I do that by butting this up to the seam line that I've just pressed. And with my white pen, I mark this line. I do the same thing here. I butt this up to my seam line, and I draw this right line. Now, this is on the right side of your quilt. You can also do it on the wrong side, which may even make things easier. So then, when I go to actually stitch, I don't just line up this, I actually line those up. So imagine, if you will, that now I'm doing this, let's pretend these two are one piece of fabric. So I would have butted this ruler up to where I joined the border, and I would have marked here, right here with my pen, my disappearing ink. I would have done the same thing here, where the border joined the quilt. I would have marked straight down. So let me put a pin there. Hold on. I'm not too organized today. Okay. So let's say I've got the lines marked here. And I would have, you'd see a white line here, and it would have been here. Let me just pin this. And then the same thing here, where the border joined the quilt to the end, I would have marked it with that disappearing ink, which you would see a line down here, but this pin just marks it. So now the patterns tell you, will you stop it? I wonder why I have a dog sometimes. She thinks she's one of us. So the patterns would be telling you to fold your two pieces of border together and sew along this line. Now remember, this would not be cut. I'd actually have border out here with this line marked. So what I do is I take my pen, put the pieces together, and I, hold on, put a pin like this along the marked diagonal. Sort of like if you've made clothes, matching your dart lines. So I match that up. But I also, and actually I think maybe I do this line first. Those other two lines I added, I mark those. I pin those together as well. It's not going straight here because this is all cut and stuff. And actually, as I said before, what you can do is where we put the lines on the front, where I butted up against the seam line, mark that line on the wrong side. Mark that line on the wrong side too. So you'll have those two lines. And I don't know why this isn't lining up, other than the fact that my borders seem to be a different size. But anyway, I think you get the idea. Pin that first, then pin this. And when you pin this first, you're going to start your first pin. Pin this first. You're going to start your first pin right where you sewed to. That way you make sure that your points are completely matching. Here, you can see my seam here, if I can find it. Here. So when I sewed, I had these seams flipped up. And you can see actually where I always reverse stitch when I'm starting a seam, but you can see how closely matched up those two seams are. When you do that, that completely closes up that hole. You may have a little bit of a difference, but sometimes a little bit of a difference actually helps because it gives your fabric a little bit of area to move around in. So you're going to pin from that point and make sure if you have double border like this, make sure your seams match. Put a pin in going in this direction. Open it up to the right side. Make sure you're all matched up, which I'm not now, but you get the idea. Then continue pinning down straight along that extra line we made, right along here, all the way to the end. Now, I only use this helps me keep my point, my actual miter in position. I don't sew on that extra line I drew. I just use that. Now, once you've got that done, then that shows you everything else should then line up. You're then going to match up this stitching line with needles, just like you do a dart again, and then sew. From where the point, the X is, to the end. From where the X is to the end. And that should give you a perfect miter. Now, this extra line is the one I was telling you I added. And why it makes a difference is because it helps you line up everything here. A lot of times miters go wrong because you've pulled one side too far over, or you don't have things quite right. But if you add this extra line, match it up, you're in good shape. Now, I had shown you how to draw it from the right side. If you want to draw that extra line from the wrong side, once again, you want to find where your seam, the seam where you're joining the border, where your miter is going to start to the rest of the quilt. Line your ruler up against that seam and mark down here. Do it also on this side. Line it up against your seam line and mark there. And then it's actually easier when you're sewing if it's marked on the wrong side. When you're marking it, it can be easier from the right side. So that's the trick. So I hope that works for you. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to call. Trust me, I'm not planning to go into the video making business because I'm pretty poor at this. But so good luck. Any questions, let me know. Bye bye.